Okay, the preparation time has expired. Welcome to the Octo panel. And on the government side, we have Tokyo E. On the opposition side, we have Watt A. The motion for this round is this House would force feed prisoners who are on hunger strike even when they are consent to death. Okay, first we call upon the Prime Minister Octo to deliver the speech for 7 minutes. Here.
Mr. Speaker, we agree that the prisoners also have basic rights, such as food and shelter, but going on hunger strike infringes the fundamental duty that prisoners have. That is why we are happy to propose this motion. Two substantive points from our side of the House. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about to what extent prisoner has duty to what they did as a crime. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about who actually going to hunger strike and what is the reality of hunger strikes. Before moving on, I'd like to clarify our model we are standing on. In this motion, hunger strike is defined as the people intentionally reject food. We are not talking about the people who skip meat just because of the oversleep and so on. And when officer notice that people are going to hunger strike, then the prisoner, the jailer, would force them to eat. Firstly, we do not make them go to ordinary practices, and then we, for example, inject energy or supplement. But we do not allow jailers to torture them. These are our model we are standing on. Having said that, I'd like to talk about my first issue. To what extent the prisoners has duty. We think bodily autonomy can be restricted in the case of prisoners because they have the duty of rehabilitation and compensation towards the victims, for example, or the society. Why those duties are important is that those systems are decided by a democratic system to make prisoners compensate or rehabilitate for what they did. No, thank you. That's why we think the prisoners have those duties, and the prisoners has to conduct those duties in actuality. That is why even under the status quo, we restrict freedom of mobility of the jailer, of the prisoners. They cannot go out of jail because they have to do those duties. And they also limited the right to reprocreation. They are not allowed to have children in those jails. That is why we can say that bodily autonomy can be restricted, especially in the case of prisoners. Moreover, we say the right to death is also strongly prohibited, even under the state.
Clarification, sir.
Go ahead.
Which kind of country do you have in mind to propose a motion?
We are talking about liberal democratic countries where there is no death penalty. Because even under the status quo, many countries already abolished death penalty.
Yeah.
Having said that, secondly, about the right to death, even outside of the society, whether there's right to death exists or not is still dubious. Because if one person in danger of death or if one person commits suicide, still the government possibly helps them, calling an ambulance and making them hospitals. That is why we think whether right to death should be allowed or not is still dubious. And especially, moreover, euthanasia is also prohibited in many contexts, except for several states, few states in US and few countries. That is why we think euthanasia, we are talking about a country where euthanasia is also prohibited. And secondly, at least inside the jail, we think those kind of rights is strongly prohibited. Because even under the status quo, it is prohibited to bring rope to inside the room in the jail, because we have to prevent criminals to commit a suicide. That is why we think, and this penalty is also prohibited to make them conduct their duties. That is why we think those rights should not be allowed. Why those kind of limitations can be allowed? Because minimum health and life is necessary to conduct minimum level to conduct studying or working inside of the jail, which is necessary for the rehabilitation and compensation. Why those actions is important is that firstly we have to guarantee the social security, which is only guaranteed by the rehabilitation of the criminals. That is why we think to guarantee the social security, those kind of actually conduct of rehabilitation is important. Moreover, we think for the victims, this is the only way for them to compensate, to make criminals compensate for what they did, because the victims cannot revenge on their own. That is why we think that the government has to, as a practice, has to make criminals compensate for themselves. We think just dying is too easy choice for the criminals to compensate for victims. No, thank you. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about what is happening in actuality. We think in many cases the criminals are going on hunger strike based on selfish reasons. We know that some people may want to improve the condition of jail, but in many cases they just want to defy the current system in jail. They just oppose the life itself. Moreover, we say, in that situation, the criminals have the intention to go to better jail, going to hunger strike, or they want to reduce sentences, going to hunger strike. In that sense, we think the consent itself is still dubious, because we cannot know whether the consent is real or not. Though some criminals may consent to this, that may be a fake. When the criminals say they consent to this, it may be that the criminals just want to go to better jail. Wearing a face of the expression of death. No, thank you. Why this kind of action should be prohibited is that if they cannot maintain a minimum level of health, we think that the criminal cannot conduct the minimum level of studying and working, which is, we think, against the democratic system, which is decided by the people's voice. We think the criminals may have the minimum right of food and security, food and shelter and clothes, but that does not mean that the criminal can do anything. We think in this situation, because criminals have the duty to conduct the rehabilitation and compensation, we think those that can be prohibited. For all these reasons, we are happy to propose.
Okay, thank you for the Prime Minister. Next we call upon the Leader of Opposition, Shingo, to deliver the speech for 7 minutes. Here.
The only thing that I can agree to Prime Minister is that we should not make a torture towards prisoners. We think a characterization of the prisoner who are on the hunger strike have a reason to have a hunger strike. I will prove in my LO speech to prove this is one of the worst possible treatment towards prisoner, and we think this force feed tantamounts to force to be tortured. Secondly, how after taking the proposal, this precious message sent by the protester as well as the prisoner is diminished, and why is it extremely bad for us to have in mind that the United States of America is perpetrating one of the atrocious injustices in Guantanamo, in which was the most relevant context that we have to identify in the debate. I'm going to talk about two things. Firstly, why this is one of the worst possible treatment towards prisoners. Second, how the precious messages is diminished. But for that, I will make 2 points of response. The first thing they said is that, you know what, this context is liberal democracy. So I would question whether the characterization of a prisoner relevant and in which they have in mind to the hunger strikes to begin with. In liberal democracy, many prisoners want to go out from jail in general. In many cases, they do not want to stay in prison, and they want to try hard to rehabilitate it and go back to the society because prison is the worst place. And we think there's a good reason for prisoners not to go to hunger strike, but to rehabilitate to begin with. So also, reasonable prisoners go through the process of rehabilitation, not go to hunger strike to begin with. And secondly, they characterize hunger strike as suicide, which is a totally different matter, Mr. Speaker, because suicide is not a way of protest, Mr. Speaker. They miss a nuance that hunger strike to begin with, Mr. Speaker. They don't have any analysis whatsoever of how there's a differentiation of just mere suicide to escape from rehabilitation and with an intent to rectify the social injustice as a form of strike to begin with. We don't think there's I don't think there's zero relevancy for the argumentation to support the motion. All refutation will be dealt with my precious partner. So let me concentrate to my positive material to identify the context first and how hunger strike is the only way of protest and also the only way to opt out from the living hell from the perspective of people or prisoners who are going under hunger strike, because there is a good reason for us to assume that there are living hell from their perspective because they have consented to death to begin with. So context identification first. The reason why they had not vetoed this motion because they were ignorant about the context of Guantanamo on the debate to begin with. For the United States, prisoners who are under hunger strike in Guantanamo was arbitrarily arrested, and there are people from foreign country, Mr. Speaker, and so that their analysis of having they have committed a crime in a domestic country, and therefore they have to rehabilitate, and therefore have to compensate to their domestic country. It's totally relevant to this motion also to begin with. People from Afghanistan, people from Iraq, people from Syria, without evidence, based on a personal relationship between the suspected terrorists, or even horribly, U.S. Army or CIA was sent to villages in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq, and destroyed those villages, and forcibly fetched every single member of the villages to a Guantanamo in the context of fear of terrorism, Mr. Speaker. That's a relevant context that we have to identify in the debate, Mr. Speaker. And that's how they were angry about the United States of America, and that's how they were angry, and they were having a protest in the form of hunger strike. From the perspective of suspected terrorists or people under prisoners who are under hunger strike, being forced to feed and prolonging life in prison in Guantanamo is in fact a living hell, and prolong a life which is not worth valuing. The reason why torture is bad is precisely because people who are going to have a torture is prolonging a life worth not valuing from the perspective of individual to begin with. They are going to have every single people who under the hunger strike to have a torture to begin with. Death is the only way to protest from their perspective, and death is the only way to opt out from the living hell. In the form of protest, it is the only way, because death represents their life do not have worth living from their view, Mr. Speaker. Those genuine voices, genuine representation, or genuine expression of how injustice is harsh from their perspective is only represented from their death. And furthermore, opting out for a better life from their perspective is only way, because death escaped from living hell, and furthermore, it having a savior to their vote as Arabs after life, Mr. Speaker. It is the only way for the death, for those lives to be better off under the status quo, in which if they oppose to torture, they should join us, Mr. Speaker. Second point. Yes, sir. Yes, madam.
So you're just trying to escape and justify that this and saying that this is the easy option. Don't you think how in your product you can save these people directly?
Yeah, but that's precisely going to explain my second point. How after the proposal, those precious messages to change the situation of Guantanamo is less likely to occur and never going to occur on that side will have status quo. In a status quo, the United States of citizens conceive the even suspected terrorists as real terrorists and absolute evil, given the context of real experience of 9/11 and the rhetoric of right-wing parties or media to say, we have to be zero tolerant to terrorists, and we have to make as many efforts as possible to mitigate the possibility of terrorists. Again, there's no incentive to improve if the situation of injustice, the sense of injustices, is directly seen to American citizens. This, on the contrary, Mr. Speaker, is in fact having a universal impact to move. They have to realize for the people how harsh the situation is. So, and also so stop how Guantanamo is bad, so on and so forth. Domestically, Mr. Speaker, United States, Mr. Speaker, under status quo, there has a possibility for left-wing media or left-wing political party to pick up that, the United States of America is having this kind of injustices towards the suspected terrorists, in which we have to change. Or internationally, Mr. Speaker, remember the monk who had been a fireball in the other way of protest in Tunisia, Mr. Speaker. Those deaths had moved an international society to say what kind of injustices is perpetrated in specific context, so on and so forth. They lose an impetus to remove to change these kind of injustices in which they had agreed torture is bad. Mr. Speaker, with this policy, Mr. Speaker, their policy do not necessarily better off the life of the prisoner. They do not change the injustice. That's what we oppose.
Okay, thank you for the leader of opposition. Next, we call upon Deputy Prime Minister Masaya to deliver the speech for 7 minutes. Here.
Mr. Speaker, I'm confused that they actually posted us two extreme case or two extreme unfair example like Guantanamo. Because the motion doesn't include Guantanamo in the exact word. We don't think the Guantanamo is the only context of this debate. And if we as a Deputy Prime Minister, I'm going to show you why permitting them to die, if they consent to, or if they want to, why this is totally against rehabilitation, because that is giving them bargaining chip for using the bargaining chip. It's unfair, or why it's the unfair situation I'm going to talk about. Before that, several points for rebuttal to their side. As I have said in my introduction, actually all arguments is based on the only one example, like Guantanamo. And they say that problem of Guantanamo under the status quo is the injustice of court, and they are arrested without evidence, and they are tortured in that kind of inside of Guantanamo, and several responses to this side. And if the problem is that no evidence, then we say that those sort of court will be improved, should be changed. It's not the problem of the prison, right? It's prison or military or the court, nothing. And if the situation is so serious, inside of Guantanamo, and actually tens of hundreds of people are tortured or die, and firstly, we are very happy to ban torture inside of Guantanamo, and it's totally irrelevant in the context of totally irrelevant case with this policy. And secondly, and if the situation inside of Guantanamo is so serious, if those sort of info is revealed, that actually we can criticism from other society or from the criticism from other people will occur, and the fact that they know that the situation inside of Guantanamo, that sort of criticism from other society will be happen on an paradigm. So considering those points, the problem inside Guantanamo is not the exact reason to oppose this motion, because those sort of problems can be solved by whether or not regardless of opposing to this motion. Yes.
People who committed hunger strike strongly hate the state. Rehabilitation will succeed only when there is a trust for government. In your paradigm, how do you achieve this rehabilitation without trust from government?
Yeah. Thank you for giving introduction to my main points. So, actually, the why the prison, so we have to recognize the reason why prison exists. Firstly, as I have said, it's for rehabilitation, and secondly, it's for retribution, right? And I will show you one by one. And firstly, the rehabilitation. I'll show the distribution or perspective of this motion. Actually, considering the more fair context of this debate, that those sort of arrested, those sort of accused, have evidence and actually committed some vicious crime, and they are in prison. And those sort of people actually committed that vicious thing. They are totally different from other people who have mobility of right. And actually, they are again, they actually committed something to decrease the lives of other people, such other victims, right? And so, actually, if we permit those sort of people to die by their consent, actually, that means that we give them pleasure, we give them freedom, we give them right to do what they like. And actually, considering that realistic context of this today, the accused actually, for example, kill innocent people, and actually in this situation, the rights of imprisoned, rights of arrested, and rights of victims actually are fighting against. And if we permit those sort of arrested to do what they like, and we don't and if we don't permit those victims to kill the offenders if they want to do, and actually those sort of so under the paradigm we don't prioritize, we don't recognize they don't recognize the rights of victims. We only saying that only prioritizing the rights of arrested. Why those sort of, we strongly oppose that sort of unfair stance on their side of the house, because they totally miss, no thank you, the rights of the victims. And actually that's why it's so problematic. Firstly, that actually the potential criminal, those who are not arrested yet, will think that I can die if I want to. Become prison, get into prison, right? No, thank you. And it will hugely disincentivize them to obey the order from the authorities or from the order of after you have the non-content rehabilitation, because they can oppose by saying I can hunger strike and I can die. And also this will if we permit those sort of hunger strike, this will hugely incapacitate for policemen to do what they should do, because the police are under their paradigm. Police are always under the pressure that there's a possibility for police to kill those sort of arrested, because they are rejected having food, or they rejected to live. And so under their paradigm, the police fear that they can kill them, and they fear that they mentally oppressed to force them to what they should do as a rehabilitation, such as the labor imprisonment or something like studying. And considering that incentive of the arrested and considering the capacity of the police, we say their paradigm is too unfair and against the distribution concept, and so we propose this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the Deputy Prime Minister. Next we call upon the Leader of Opposition Kazuma to deliver the speech for 7 minutes. Here.
I'm sick and tired of their characterization that these kind of people, those who actually conduct the hunger strike is stupid and actually refuse to eat without any reasonable reason. Do not this kind of characterization. So we say hunger strike has ambition, has a protest to the social injustice that has been conducted in the Guantanamo or the inhumane treated, and these kind of voices should be heard on our side of the house. That's why these kind of forces to continue the living here is tantamount to the torture, tantamount to the violation of the human life, and he said this is heinous. More than that, this kind of death has massive power to change the social narrative to mitigate these kind of heinous acts in the prison, in the Guantanamo, or in the some heinous rogue state, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we have to oppose this motion. Firstly, my substantive construct why this. How the citizen can be moved by the power of the death and actually these kind of empower the narrative against the heinous act of Guantanamo. Before moving on to my argument, several rebuttal to make. The context of the debate, they provide us liberal democracy, Korea, Japan, or something like that. Four responses. Firstly, it is factually true. We and I cannot have the example of the hunger death on the Japan, the hunger death on the South Korea, South Korea. There is no relevance to the LDC, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, more specifically, situations today, there is no good reason to death of these kind of liberal democracy because the situation is much better. Why the death is fundamentally, the death is finally making the decision of the individual the most irreversible thing. Just the condition of the prison is so humid or something like that does not become tantamount to the death, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, these kind of people are not so stupid to sacrifice their life to the condition of the jail or forced child, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, no necessity to protest by means of the hunger death. If you want to be released because you are the host repair, you can ask the jail, ask the court, you can ask the tribunal to ask again to trial or something like that. This kind of the more legitimate way of the protest if you are disliking the government or disliking the decision of the court, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the context of this debate is inhumanely tortured and there is no way out or no escape from this kind of serious situation, and the only way to escape from is the death. Only way to protect it is the death. This is the context of this debate, and we properly suggested that this context, the Guantanamo or something like that, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any meaningful rebuttal, we can accept now, but you do not. Secondly, they say, the first speaker say, torture is inhumane, but this kind of hunger strike, force feeding is not. We say this is a torture, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, to enforce living hell, to continue living hell, being the whip, being the torture, being asked by the American citizen to negate your fundamental identity continuously to live is fundamentally tantamount to the death. And we say this is a more than death, more than torture, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why this kind of salvation from this kind of living hell should be admitted, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. And the second speaker suddenly says, inhumane thing is to some extent justifiable because these kind of people is perpetrator, this kind of people is actually committing a crime. This kind of thing is actually contradict with the first speaker, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, because the first speaker admitted inhumanity cannot be permitted in any circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, and thirdly, that they never ever talking about the benefit after taking proposal. My partner clearly pointed out the characterization of the hunger strike people actually hate, outvote, dislike, and kill the nation to the extent of the death, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, no motivation or no will to be rehabilitated to come back to the society at the first place. What the benefit after living, after being forced to live? They have to talk about, but they didn't. To the second speaker, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to my first substantive, or why this is fundamentally necessary, the first citizen cannot, Mr. Speaker. Even in the situation of the Guantanamo, the media, the freelance, or these kind of the companies, the Fox News, the BBC or CNN has a way to journalists and take a picture and to write about the station. This is a legitimate context we have to talk about. We can actually have a means to tell the truth about the Guantanamo, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Recognizing the this station, death has a message to the American citizens, the three reasons. Firstly, death has the power. Everyone, death is universally recognized as a huge thing. And secondly, will of grievance can be effectively conveyed to the extent of the death. To the extent of the death, these kinds of the people suffer. This kind of message is actually conveyed to the American citizen, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Thirdly, more importantly, the unique context of America. The American people, the American military are respected for the death because these kind of the people, the father and these kind of relatives go to war for the consent to the death. And this kind of feeling of death on the word of the death is completely near to American citizens, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. That's why,
if you're so eager to try to limit the context of this debate to Guantanamo, you have the burden to show in the future those sort of things won't occur in other areas.
Okay, if you are talking about the context, you should talk about the legitimate context on your side of the house. And moving on to my argument. And this kind of death is completely near to the American citizens. That's why if the American people, the American citizens hear that these kind of Iraqi people death, hunger death, and this kind of impact of death is so hugely on the mind of the American people, we can effectively change the mindset of the American people. These kind of American people can feel how grievances they have and what kind of situation they are in. That's why this kind of the opinion poll is actually changing. We should change the Guantanamo. Obama cannot do this. Hillary should do this. And this kind of social pressure to change the Guantanamo is actually occurring now. That's why this is completely unique for changing society to fix this kind of injustices conducted in America. But they, in their side of the house, continuously feeding and pretend to be are good, and we cannot change that. That's why the voice is completely important for the next victim, the possible victim on our side of the house. For these reasons, we are very proud for this motion.
Okay, thank you for the detailed leader position. Next we call upon the government whip Kanako to deliver the speech for 7 minutes here.
Mr. Speaker. So at this government week, I have two questions to talk about. First, when there is two different contexts existing, first of all, I want to talk about ordinary prison cases when in a democratic state, whether or not it can be a reason to result in a hunger strike if justifiable or not. And secondly, I'm going to specifically talking about the Guantanamo cases, whether or not what they're exactly talking about, whether or not they're hunger strike people, so this is justified in the first place, or it is exactly necessary for changing the situation. All my rebuttal included in my speech. First of all, as the basic cases coming from my partner, from my two speakers, in the cases like in general liberal democratic states, they came up and told us first, let's take the example of Japan or Korea. So we admit that because first of all, not every single case, because this motion say that even when they consent to death, not exactly mean that every single case is that they do hunger strike to die, because if they admit that hunger strike is protest, in some cases, especially when ordinary cases, we admit the hunger strike they do for changing the situation inside prison, and we couldn't see why it is exactly necessary. Because if the changing situation of the hunger, like inside prison is necessary, why don't you just write about inside a situation like prisons? These kind of letters to like outside society, even even after you get out of the society, these kind of letter of books is already published in the society, have a huge impact in the society. We don't see why no thank you letter exactly necessary in the first place. Secondly, they talked about a case of false charging. But exactly their case, admitting, allowing them to die, if the full charge is so harsh, when the chance of second charge is so small, why don't they just die as a one option? We think it's really, really offensive because our partner, by never accepting their option as die, by never accepting like these kind of like hunger strike to the extent of dying, by only when we can allow these kind of people to have a chance to like resort to the full to recharge of the forced charge. That's why like Hakamada Jiken or other cases is already doing like for the recharge and so sufficiently so. Because uniquely our partner not admitting the choice of death is exactly saving the exact people who is suffering from forced charges, right? We never see why their characterization or why their claim is uniquely necessary. No, thank you. Then why even the hunger strike cases is uniquely not justifiable? Because my partners already told you exact reason why like these kind of people inside prison like do the rehabilitation and follow the order of the prison is exactly necessary for compensating for the social injustices they themselves already created, especially in the liberal democratic states prison. That's why it is never allowed to like do the result of the hunger strike and to try to defy the current like a system of prison by saying that I won't eat these kind of things, I won't like reject the complete food. By doing these kind of things, they will affect the exact education or like by not following the order, it will create a norm that like sometimes you can like defy the law, norm of prison or those sort of things. Especially like they also admitted that somehow that inside prison, these kind of ordering system or some prisoners are not perfect or sometimes not morally like complete, that they also admitted if that is the case, we think it is really more harmful on our side of the house. But our paradigm, like by strictly making people strictly following the law, we can more likely to rehabilitate these kind of people. At least, even if malicious people have more possibility, at least I have to continue to live, at least I have to go out into the society to live to complete my life. Our paradigm is far more beneficial, not only for these kind of people, but also outside society.
If the chance for recharge is available in LDC in a status quo, prisoners is allowed on our side as well. So what is the point of rebuttal?
So like, okay, because what I just said is that all the rebuttals, they are also admitted that because they have to die, means that they lose the chance to recharge in the first place. If you have so many times before the recharge, you're just saying you just died. Okay, second case about the Guantanamo cases. What they're talking about, the Guantanamo cases, because under the name of zero tolerance, that they are arbitrarily arrested or those sort of cases. But they told us like life is necessary because they're same as American soldiers. It's completely different when we all know that American soldiers stopped the nation, but like a suspected terrorist or suspected terrorism inside the Guantanamo people, American citizens know that to some extent they may be like a good actor, they may be some people are innocent, but they inherently have to think that majority of citizens are really suspected, especially coming from ISIS or having some sort of threat to your American nation, which means that it is completely different from the mindset of people. Even if some people are dying, they are more likely to think that if these kind of people are even dying, we don't think that there is so much impact, same impact as the national American citizen will be occurring, we can be really doubtful about this case. Then, our paradigm is far also beneficial because already you know that the people inside Guantanamo torture people, already published in book about exactly like diary about on what day, who arrested you, who did who did like oral like asking, or who did the torture to you, how long, or how much extent. These kind of letter is already published into the society, have a huge impact in the society, comparing like just a number of people dying, but rather even instead of status quo, we are already publishing vast number of viral letters. What exactly was done? It is far more like approaching to you, far more like really threatening to your own body. We think that it's more likely that our part will also have a huge impact, especially the admitted existence of media not thinking no more. The existence accepted the huge impact of the media or a huge possibility of discussion. They're only like unique analysis was life is unique, life has the impact, life have the same as American citizens. What we couldn't see is really doubtful. Then why our parliament is far more beneficial? Because the very accepting of the choice of dying also making a mindset to people that if you're suffering from torture, you have an option to die. Why it's justifiable? We think it is merely traumatic because the more number of people, because some number of people are already like going out of the prison Guantanamo, there are possibility of like going out of this kind of the Guantanamo, come back to your own home country, or like going after the USA, or going stay to like live in the USA. These kind of options to like restart your life are also admitted. Even if you admit the possibility of PTSD, but still you can continue life, meet your family. These possibilities are remaining. On their side of by allowing choice as one certain normal, one certain option, we think it's really, really traumatic because they never have option to restart your life. Exactly when they admitted that they are so much suffering and they want to get out of this kind of situation, we think it is really traumatic. For all these reasons, we are happy to propose. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the government whip. Next we call upon the opposition whip, Tatsumi, to deliver the speech for 7 minutes. Here.
Three things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to examine their contextualization. I want to say, even we assume their contextualization was true, why their logic doesn't stand. I will rebut entire context coming from the other side. Secondly, I want to examine who commit hunger strike. I want to clarify who is the target of this debate. Thirdly, I want to examine how hunger strike changes society. That's the response to POI coming from him. So, moving to the first point, I want to engage what entire government side has said. They say the reason why we never allow hunger strike is reason coming from the other side is mainly three reasons. One, in order to achieve good rehabilitation. Two, in order to achieve more deterrence. Three, in order to achieve more humane environment. That I want to rebut out one by one. In terms of rehabilitation, we continuously say characterization people committed this hunger strike strongly take this stage. Then compare, I commit it, this is a more better than leaving this prison. They think that after that they said hunger strike, which means this environment itself is so severe. Then, Mr. Speaker, under that circumstance, how do you achieve rehabilitation itself? Mr. Speaker, rehabilitation only happens when you regret your activity. When you face your past injustice, so you start to regret it. But in your paradigm, the people put this responsibility on government. Because I'm here, I feel so uncomfortable. Because government is a city, government is bad. That's why I'm here. This kind of narrative, this kind of mindset easily happens under their paradigm. That's why I continuously ask to entire government side, how do you achieve rehabilitation? Unfortunately, no response is coming from the other. It's so crucially damaging their entire case. So, secondly, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the deterrence, so they say the second speaker has said, in order to achieve the more deterrence, we need this motion. But it's very weird motion. Deputy Prime Minister said that people think, oh, even I go to prison, I can die. That's why there's no deterrence. I can commit a crime. It's fundamentally stupid because if you die, it's a tantamount to death penalty. What kind of people commit crime in order to committed suicide. So their characterization is fundamentally weird. In order, if you want to achieve the huge deterrence, make every kind of punishment as death penalty. No exclusive reasons that are coming from the other side. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, they say this feeding, the force feed, is a more humane way because at the end of the day, these people can rehabilitate and can go to the society. So that's why we have to take this motion. That's the third reason coming from the other side. But it's also not true. Because in their side, as I said before, these people who strongly hate this state never rehabilitate under their paradigm. So that's under their paradigm, in order to achieve social security, they have to segregate this person entirely. This is a realistic context because these people actually hate government because that's why they commit hunger strike. After we release this person on society, probably this person start to commit terrorism in order to crack down this government in order to show their hate for the state. These persons, generally speaking, people committing hunger strike are dangerous. In your paradigm, this person never released to society from the beginning. Then, Mr. Speaker, what's the reality this prisoner have to face? In their paradigm, this prisoner always face this severe condition. Because, as I said before, only when the environment is so severe, people committed hunger strike. So that's in their paradigm, continuously these people face this severe circumstance. Compared to this is a more humane, as which the clearly explained this point. Comparatively, in our side, we can achieve the more better environment. They actually oppose torture. We support it. This is a tantamount to torture. We should oppose it. What's the question?
Okay, so we admit to some extent that prisoners need to learn basic morality. Then why the untrust people in your part is okay when there's no hope for rehabilitation? You say dying just okay.
So we say, so it's not our burden of proof. If there's a man, there's no room to rehabilitate, there's no room to regret, what should I do? If these guys consent to death, at the end of the day, in our side, we can provide better environment for him. But in your side, what's the benefit? What's the benefit as a government do you provide? No benefit to this man. In their side, they confine this man in living hell. In our side, the giving right to death. In our side, at least we can achieve the more better environment. In your side, no rehabilitation, only the living hell. This is the basic comparison which we prefer. No thank you. So moving to the second point. Who committed the hunger strike? So I'm gonna combine this second point and third point. The hunger strike can change the society, which is a response to the POI. So previous speaker said that in the status quo, the media already go to Guantanamo, so that's why that's enough. There's a letter, there's a book, and so forth. But we say it's not enough because generally speaking, United States citizens has preconception. People in Guantanamo is absolutely evil people because people believe that Obama arrested these people in order to protect our security. Then people think these people living in Guantanamo is evil people. This kind of preconception doesn't exist. Then, Mr. Speaker, the unique nature of death is as Kazuma said, this can sympathize you because even the United States citizen, if you're a soldier that died, you made some monument, you made actually feeling this kind of right to death. If people commit hunger strike and die, the people start to think what's the reason he committed hunger strike. They bet their life, which means they have some big, huge reason. Then we can give opportunity to think these kind of things to United citizens. The previous speaker said later the book does exist. Yes, we concede. Some people read it, some people understood it, but the real vast majority of United States believe. Because after 9/11, people think the terrorist is a bad man, so we have to capture him, so we have to stop the committed terrorist activity. United States citizens in general preconception, the people living in Guantanamo is so evil. In order to fix it, we need this. We oppose.
Thank you for the opposition. Next we call upon the opposition reply to some of this debate. Here.
So government case was like this. They thought, we think retribution, rehabilitation, and deterrence is important for some reason. I think because they thought of their case is because in motion we have the word prisoners, and in Japanese society, with regards to word prison and court, we have to talk about deterrence, we have to talk about rehabilitation, we have to talk about retribution, so on and so forth. It's like systematic and stereotypical thought was presented by side profession. So the first point of my summary is to question the validity of the case to begin with. The second point of my summary is to show the relevancy of the opposition case to the motion. So first, validity of their case. I thought there's two reasons why I can say that their case was invalid to propose the motion. The first reason is that they were being ignorant about the relevant context in which I have presented through LO and extended through our speech. There was a response from the side government, especially DPM, and DPM was saying, Shingo was a specific person. They had narrowed the context. That's what the response. But the crucial thing was, he hadn't questioned the validity of how I narrowed down the debate to begin with. They did not question the validity of how I can specify the context which is relevant to the motion to begin with. But at the point why I thought our contextualization is valid is already is going to explain in my second point. The second reason why is that I can doubt the validity of the case is precisely because there's no good reason to assume their characterization from a perspective, at least in this debate. Firstly, is because they will become irrelevant. Secondly, is precisely because, as Kazuma said, prison in liberal democracy is better than death. Thirdly, so going through rehabilitation in LDC is also good than this. Fourth, they confuse prisoners being starved to death and prisoners going to hunger strike. The intention for death is different. They are confused with that. Fifth, recharge is available and appeal to the court is available on our side. There's no good reason for them to assume that if people want in LDC to protest against the government, they are able to use even on our side of the house. Next, sixth, there's no good reason for them to assume, because there's no news and there's no fact that the hunger strike had occurred in liberal democratic state. Real world opposed to that side because they had built a case in imaginary world. 7. Retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence. We have told you that those people who are relevant to the motion came from foreign state. Therefore, they have not committed a crime in the United States of America, so that their concern is relevant to begin with. 8. I have given 7 reasons why their case is invalid. Second point, how our policy or how our stance is relevant. We have told you strike as a way of importance of how this fourth case for strangle strike is tantamount in torture, in changing situation. DPM said, just change the situation without no explanation for reasonable prospect. We have told you fourth case is tantamount to torture because they prolong a life which is no relevance or no validity of their life from their perspective, Mr. Speaker. And also, as the importance of means to protest, death impact to change society. Kahneman explained the sympathetic effect in United States. Then I have explained that death moved firstly the left wing in America to criticize the government. Secondly, it moved the international society to criticize America. Likewise, I raised the example of monk maybe death to commit suicide as a protest in Tunisia. Mr. Speaker, I agree with Kanako that the case was parallel. So the question is, which was more valid? I think the opposition was valid. We oppose.
Thank you for the opposition reply. Next we call upon the government reply. Here.
speaker, there are two contexts in this debate. While we engage in both contexts, they can never deny the fact that other cases that exist. Only benefit coming from the opposition side was this have impact. We don't think that is the reason to oppose this motion. So in my speech, I'd like to talk about two cases. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the case of Guantanamo. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the ordinary cases. Firstly, the goal of opposition was to change the prison in Guantanamo, but they never show why hunger strike and death can change the situation of Guantanamo. Only reason was discourse, impact, and so on. But under the status quo, already Hillary said something about the Guantanamo. That is why we think there's already exists discourse. Moreover, we say even under the status quo, there is a book or photo or BBC report on the media, which is why we think there's already discourses, and the people have the impact of Guantanamo. Given that, why mere hunger strike can change the Guantanamo is dubious. On the other hand, we think it's unacceptable to use a life as just a tool to advertise the reality of Guantanamo. Because we think that, firstly, just 10 days strike does not change the situation at all. Secondly, if criminals die in actuality, then that means life is ended. They have to die. In this situation, we think we have to save those lives. Anyway, secondly, we think they are talking about the people who outrust the government. But first of all, it's not mutually exclusive. Almost all criminals have the antipathy toward the government because the killers hate society or from the experience of children or so on. That is why we think the outrust is not mutually exclusive. It's irrelevant to this debate. And secondly, we think at least if they experience a 10 years rehabilitation, they can restart the new life, which means that they can restart their lives. We think we think we can save those lives which has the possibility of restarting their life in our paradigm. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the ordinary cases. We say from the first speaker that the criminals have the duty to conduct rehabilitation, to conduct compensation for victims. Because, as I have said, it was decided by democratic system. And when the criminals conduct rehabilitation, they consented to rehabilitate before committing a crime. And we can protect the social security. And we can make criminals restart a new life. For the victims, we think this is the only way to retribute the criminals. We think that just mere death is too easy way for the criminals to compensate. That is why we think in our cases that we believe that the hunger strike shouldn't be. And even if they do not die, we think hunger strike damages the health of the criminals, which means that it will be more difficult for the criminals to rehabilitate or study or working in the jails. We think that is against the duty of the criminals. We think that should be prohibited. Mr. Speaker, in this debate, they fail to show why ordinary cases can be ignored, while we show you, even in Guantanamo cases, we are superior. Moreover, we say, at least there are ordinary cases. In that cases, we think the motion still stands without any correct engagement. For all these reasons, we are happy to propose.
Okay, thank you for the government reply. お疲れ様でした。